You're rocking with the voice of Town View. We put our spin on trending topics and school news. Thought-provoking, insightful, we speak the truth. We do it for all ages, not just for the youth. Listen close, you might learn something. Or laugh so hard, you split your side of something. Live stream a podcast. Whenever you tune in, it's sure to be a blast. Let's be honest, you don't want to miss that. Content so real, you gonna want to run it back. We keep you entertained while making an impact. Want boring announcements? Well, this is not that. Sports, pop, culture, political. Whatever you like, we got you covered, bro. It's a movement more than just a show. It's KSBM Radio.
Come closer to the music.
Broadcasting live from Marvin E. Robinson School of Business and Management, Dallas, Texas.
My radio station.
We are KSBM Radio, the voice of Townview.
Welcome, everybody, to KSBM Radio, the voice of Townview. I'm JoJo, and I'm here with
Unison,
Art Lover,
Violet.
And today we have a very special guest, Dallas ISD Superintendent Dr. Stephanie Elizalde. Dr. Elizalde isn't just any educator. She comes from a long lineage of educators, and she's following in her family's legacy with deep-rooted commitment to equality and inclusion. She's paving the way for a brighter future in our schools. Dr. Elizalde is now leading one of the biggest districts in the country. So she is here to share with us her inspiring journey and her vision for the future of Dallas ISD. So before we start, is there anything you would like to share with us today?
Well, really what I want to share is I think this is the first time I've been on a radio show in my entire career. So I'm really excited that y'all invited me, and I look forward to listening and learning from you all, hopefully even more than I might be sharing.
So you come from a family of educators. How did your family, including your grandmother and father, inspire you to become a third-generation public school educator? How did their experience influence your commitment to the field of education?
So it's really interesting. I really appreciate the question. My grandmother became a teacher after working as a telephone operator. So you all probably don't even realize there really was a time when the job was to connect people who were dialing in. So my grandmother was one of those individuals. And unfortunately, my father's father, my grandfather, passed away at a very early age and left her with 4 young boys, my father being the oldest. And so the remaining relatives of my grandfather and my grandmother's family unit, aunts and uncles, gathered together and said, Maria, you're going to need to go do a different job because the telephone job required her to work late at night. And they're like, how are you going to take care of young children? So they helped her to go to college. And so that's how she became a second grade teacher. My father then was actually studying, he wanted to be an engineer. And as he got into engineering, he was, well, shall we say, taking the scenic journey in college. So he was taking too long to get his degree. And so he met my mother, and my mother said, listen, I'm 21, we're either getting married or we're not getting married. You need to finish your degree or else. So instead of finishing in education, finishing in engineering, he went on because he could finish in education faster. And so he says, well, I kind of have always liked to be around kids. So that's how he became a teacher. What inspired me about both my grandmother and my father were the number of students. Remember, I said my grandmother taught second grade. And yet, as I was growing up, her second grade students and their families would come look for her to tell her how much of an impact she had had on their lives. And my dad taught middle schools and high schools. And kids were always at our house. He was always doing something on the weekends. So as I was growing up, I would always feel like, it would be nice to feel like you've given something to the world, that you leave something better than you received it. You have an impact on someone. You make a difference. And I used to play teacher all the time at home. But then as I was growing up, my father said, okay, mija, but just need you to know that teachers don't make a lot of money. you're not going to be poor, but you're not ever going to have a lot of things. And he said that because I kind of had a taste for wanting nicer things. And he's like, so you're going to need to realize which is more important to you. So I actually started off in college, and I ended up with a bachelor's degree in biology with enough college hours for a minor in chemistry and physics because I was pre-med. I had really wanted to be a doctor. I took a year off, and during the year off after I got my bachelor's degree, I'm like, I need a job. What am I going to do? I'm like, maybe I can teach. That was my first year teaching in 1987. I know you were not born, but in 1987 is when I started teaching at Southwest High School, which is a small district in San Antonio, Texas. And from there, I am sitting here before you 37 years later as the superintendent, getting to serve you and your family and our community as the superintendent.
So So you mentioned playing teacher when you were growing up and things like that. So what is the earliest memory you can think of that made you want to get into education?
Yeah, I was pretty bossy, like at 6. So I would tell all the neighborhood kids to come to my house. My parents had built a little playhouse in the backyard because my dad and all my uncles were all carpenters, carpinteros. So they made this little house, and so we would go inside it, and I would start off every single day, either after school or on the weekends. They would come, and I would be like, who wants to be teacher today? And I would wait like about this long, and I would say, I'm going to be teacher then, because I wouldn't give anybody else a chance, because I always wanted to be the one in charge. And so I somehow always ended up being the teacher. But from 6, I can kind of remember age 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10, and throughout that entire period of time, everybody coming to my house, and we would be just playing teacher, and there I was teaching away.
What was your high school experience like? Was there any lasting classes or teachers that left an impact on you?
Yeah, high school was a really important, I think, part of who I am today. It's the time when I remember having to really pick who my friends were going to be. There were a lot of temptations. Sometimes I may not have realized how dangerous some of the choices might have been. And I had really great teachers who were always checking in on us. Like if they saw that we weren't acting the same way, because as you all know, high school can be pretty difficult, and you're trying to fit in. And sometimes, maybe I didn't have, my skin might have been, if you look back on my biography, I grew up in Laredo, Texas, and most of Laredoans are identified at that time. We called ourselves Mexican Americans or just Mexicans. But my skin color, as you all can see, is a little light because my mother is not Latina. My father is. And so sometimes I didn't fit in because some of the kids whose skin color was darker didn't kind of accept me. It took some time. And so I found it a little challenging to fit in sometimes. And then my teachers would say, it's okay, stay focused on what you do have control over. I remember I was part of student council, and I remember one teacher reminding me, Stephanie, remember, attitude will determine your altitude. To give me a sense of, while I can't control anybody else, I could control me. So I remember teachers like Ms. Armendina de los Santos. She was my math teacher, and she would be the one that she's like, you can do calculus. I need you in calculus, from when I first started taking Algebra 2. I remember Miss Pentecost. Diana Pentecost was my English teacher, and I didn't think I was very good at English. I always thought I was good at math and science. She encouraged me that I had a writing potential. I could go on and on because I had great teachers. I also happened to have graduated from a high school with the first woman Latina high school principal. At that time, there were no female high school principals. If you were a woman, they would let you be a principal, but only at elementary schools. So there's lots of memories like that. And then lastly, I did have a very close group of friends that were also very supportive. So as we all struggle to fit in and identify who we really were or uncover it, I really found myself ultimately making a lot of good friends. Some of those friends I'm still in touch with today.
Moving on from your high school experiences, how did your college education at UT San Antonio and UT Austin shape your perspective on the education and leadership in biology and educational leadership?
So going to UT in San Antonio seemed really far, even though that was part of the reason I went there, was because it was the closest college to my hometown. And I was afraid to leave home. And I didn't want to be far. I wanted to be able to come see my parents like every weekend. And so at first, it was scary. It was really big. There were no dorms at UT San Antonio because it had just been built. And it was primarily a commuter college, which at the time I'm like, what's a commuter college? I didn't know what that was. That most of the people that went there lived in the city and they just drove to the college back home, right? They weren't going to stay in the dorm. For me, I had to get an apartment. I had to share an apartment. So first there were lots of scary parts. And then there was this whole, like, I'm going to say, sounds like a Disney movie, a whole new world, like, because I'm like, oh my gosh, look at all these different people from all these different backgrounds. Because remember, growing up in Laredo, I was used to being around people that looked and sounded more like me and my culture. And then I got to University of Texas at San Antonio, and there were all sorts of people. Nobody understood what my last name, Elizalde, was. They're like, what is that? And I'm like, well, it's Mexican. They're like, oh, I thought it was German. And I'm like, no, it's not German. So it was an opportunity for me to really understand differences and to embrace them. I would also say that you're afraid sometimes, like, am I really prepared for a university experience? And when I got there, I was like, you know what? I am prepared. My teachers did prepare me. I might have to organize my time a little better. I might have to really focus, but I was prepared. Now, I didn't say it was easy, but the question of was I prepared? I was prepared. Public education prepared me to be able to take this on. And lastly, I would say all of those experiences allowed me to feel comfortable enough that I think one of the things that helped me in college is I built relationships with all of my professors. So I would go to I didn't know what it was called at the time, but like their office hours. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what that is, but I'm going to show up, right? And so then they know who you are. So even though I was in a classroom of 50 or 75 people in a biology class, the professor knew who I was. And that allowed me to build relationships so that when I needed support, I knew where to go. And ultimately, it told me that if I could do it, anyone could get a college degree in anything they wanted. We just had to ensure that everybody had the same opportunities to be prepared.
So could you provide insights into your transition from being students of various roles within the education system, including teaching, including teacher, assistant principal, and principal?
Yeah, so basically, how did I go from a student to then becoming part of the educational system, and how I've arrived here to serve you all. So I told y'all I took a year off from school. I didn't want to start medical school until the following year. So obviously I needed a job, so I'm going to start teaching. So my first teaching assignment was teaching high school anatomy and physiology, biology, chemistry, and physics. I was not very good that year, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know that I would have kept me if I had been the principal that year, but I had a really good assistant principal because I had been assigned an assistant principal, and I had a wonderful mentor teacher. And the mentor teacher allowed me to go visit her classroom, and that's through those observations, I started learning, you know what? This is exactly what I want to do. This is exactly where I want to be. I don't want to do anything else. I don't know. I know I'm not going to make as much money as I might in another profession, but I truly, for one of the first times when you feel like I belong here. And so I did feel very, I just felt very comfortable. And so after that, I started to say, how can I make this a profession? I started on a master's degree in education, and then on so on. Became an assistant principal, became a principal, became a director, an executive director, and then in 2011, I got an opportunity to move to Dallas and became the math director here in our district. And since then, I've just been learning and growing and evolving.
So you've worked in various different school systems, large urban cities like Dallas, smaller cities. Are there any differences between the two and your approach to how you handle things within the systems?
So there are some differences. There's far more similarities than there are differences. But some of the differences, so when I was at Southwest ISD, which at that time, there was only one high school, and it was 13 schools. So it was one high school, one middle school. Ultimately, we went to 2 middle schools, and actually it was 2 junior highs because we had a 6th grade campus, and then we had like 8 elementary schools. Well, in that district, everybody knew everybody. So like if we wanted to have a principal meeting, and at the time, like I was over curriculum and instruction and professional development. So I would pick up a phone, like for real. I would pick up a phone and call the principals and go, hey, can you meet tomorrow after school at 4 o'clock? Yes. Okay, see you at central office. And so like we would just all get together. Can you imagine if I tried to do that here? Like, let me just call 238 principals and see if they can all meet tomorrow at 4 o'clock. It doesn't work in a system this large, right? So the way in which we were responsive, like you could turn on a dime. Like if some student came to us at the high school and said, hey, I see a challenge here. Like they would call central, we would, like everything would be fast. So part of learning that system, the pluses, I had to know a lot, because I was the curriculum department. In our district, we have a curriculum department, but there's a math director, there's an ELAR director, there's a social studies. When I was a curriculum director, I was math, I was science, I was social studies, I was English. So the strength of that is I got to learn a lot of things. So as I continued to grow, what I realized was in whatever size organization I was in, it was important that we be responsive to our student and our team, meaning your teachers, our support staff, our principals. We needed to turn on a dime. And that's part of my goal today is how do we take a very large system and find a way to be more quicker in providing you the support that all of our team members and our students need.
You have emphasized the importance of equity and excellence in education. How do you define these terms, and what strategies do you plan to implement to ensure equity in Dallas ISD?
Yeah, those are words that have become like they're very popular. A lot of people use them, and you asked such an important question. Like, well, first, how do you define them? So I'm going to take a moment to say sometimes equality and equity can be the same, and sometimes they're not the same. So I'm going to give you, and this is why I think that word equity to start with is so important. If I go to a doctor and I say, my doctor treats everybody the same, that sounds really good, right? Well, how far should I be treated the same? So let's say you go see my doctor, he's your doctor too, or she is your doctor too. And as you go see our doctor, you have a broken arm. So she provides a treatment for your broken arm. Now I go and she says, but I treat everybody the same. And I'm like, yes, but I have high blood pressure. Yes, but I treat every student the same. So I just provided a cast on the previous patient, so I'm going to provide you a cast. Well, that would be ridiculous. Why? Because my arm isn't broken. Well, but that's equality. She's going to treat everybody the same. Equity means we respond based on what the need is. So really, it's not about equality or equity. It's about fairness and justice. So equality, though, could also be good. Let me give you an example. Should all of us be at work at the same time? Like if it says the school starts at, make up a time, 9:30, then should all of us be here by 9:30? Should that be the same expectation? Yes. Well, that's fairness and justice, that everyone should have to be here. But when a student is needing, or a teacher or a principal needs some additional support because of things that are outside of their control, when we respond to that, it doesn't mean we should do it for everybody. It means we should do it for those who need it. So if I have a school that has not been taken care of physically, the facility, is it important that we put more dollars into that school? Or do we just take the dollars and say, everybody's gonna get the same dollars of school for each school? Do you see what I'm saying? And so sometimes it's hard to understand, why did some schools get so much money? Well, because they haven't gotten in a very long time. So that's equity. Excellence means we never lower our standard. No matter what our obstacles are, if I can be sitting in the superintendency seat, then every single one of you should be able to sit in the superintendency if that's what you choose to do. So excellence means whatever we think is best for any student should be for every student.
Before you were superintendent at Austin and Dallas ISD, you were the chief schools officer for Dallas ISD. Can you share how those experiences have prepared you for your current role?
Absolutely. The chief of schools role was one of the most challenging roles I think I've ever had. Part of that was that it was absolutely a new role. I had never done that work before, and we were also in a time when we had a lot of schools that were not performing well in our district. So there was a lot of pressure. And then I realized I was not teaching any students. So I was going to be held accountable for how students did, but I wasn't teaching any of you. I had to recognize that all of my work was going to be done through principals, through teachers. So I had to shift from thinking of being a teacher to being a teacher supporter, a principal supporter. How do I lift up the people who are leading the work for students? And so that allowed me to evolve. You know, I think education is another word for evolution. I think, and the day that I'm saying to you all, oh, I don't need to learn anything, I shouldn't be the superintendent. Every day I learn something. Every day I evolve if I'm willing to do three things. One, I have to own whatever's happening. I have to own it. Then I have to be a problem solver, not a problem maker. And probably the most important lesson I've learned is to be reflective. It's very easy to tell everybody else what they should do. We should never tell anyone else what to do until we pick up the mirror and ask ourselves, what could we have done differently, right? Because I don't control anyone. I actually don't control anyone in this room at all. I can influence the process, but I only influence the process if I build relationships. And so I think the whole component of how did that influence my role is I continue to hold up the mirror. Sometimes those are hard conversations. I don't know how you all feel, but sometimes something has to be pointed out to me that I'm not too proud of. But here's the strength in that. There's strength in being able to look at your own behavior and then say, you know what? I wish it hadn't happened that way, and I'm going to make sure I don't do that again. That's called education. That's called evolution. That's called, my dad says, everybody grows old, but only a few people grow up.
So you, as a superintendent, you have a track record of lifting up students and improving academic achievement. How do you do it basically? What are some strategies you found that work, and what are some ways that you connect with the students to help raise them up?
So first, I think the way we raise students up, the most important way is by ensuring that we have the most effective principals, followed very quickly by the most effective teachers. Because when I put my emphasis, and the principal is pivotal, and you all know that because you've done school for a while, and I know you've had some good principals, and I know you've had some great principals, and I know you know the difference. And our job is to get our principals who are good and help them turn into great. Because where you have a great principal, what kind of teachers do you have? You have great teachers. And so teachers are the individuals who you connect with the most. So my job truly, like, if you can imagine an inverted triangle, I'm at the bottom of this organization because my job is to lift up central office staff who support, like I know you all know the term, executive directors or associate superintendents, deputy chiefs. So my job is to get that level to be inspired, motivated, and reflective problem solvers, to lift up our principals. So principals lift up assistant principals, counselors, teachers, because who's actually at the top of this inverted triangle? You all are. We should never forget who our client ultimately is. And so I would also say, taking up an opportunity like today, if students invite me, the best way that I can connect is to spend time with students. It doesn't have to be every day. Whenever someone asks if I can interact, I work to try to go to events, whether those are football games or the STEM Expo or cheer camps or volleyball games. It's a very large district. I'm one person. I certainly can't be at every single thing, but I know it makes a difference for you all when you do know that I was at a certain event, because then it says that my actions say you are important to this district. And so I think those are some of the things I do. And lastly, we've got our team board, which is a formal grouping of students that get to come together, and I get to stand before that group and listen to hear if there's some concerns or things that I can begin to address.
So where do you see Dallas ISD in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I see the trajectory, and I see endless possibilities. I see over the rainbow, like I see a pot of gold. It is one of those opportunities, because when I walk classrooms, probably will connect even to the previous, what are the other things I do? I go to schools on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I go into the classroom so I can talk to students and I can observe instruction, because the most important part of the day is the instruction, right? So I should spend some time talking about instruction. So when I think about what I'm observing and how our teachers are supporting you, our counselors, our principals, I am elated about the level of challenge that I see our teachers giving you all and how you all are meeting those challenges. And people sometimes think, they may sometimes not know. Certainly Townview has an excellent reputation. You all are always high performing. We have other schools in our district who are high performing that may not be a magnet school. Sometimes people don't hear about all of that. And so we're not where we need to be yet, but we're getting there. So to answer your question directly, I see a day when all 238 of our schools are all high achieving by whatever rating system the state has. If it's a letter grade, they're all going to be A's and B's. I absolutely, to my core, believe that will occur in 5 to 10 years.
So what strategies will you implement to bridge those achievement gaps within the district?
Yep. So some of the work we're already doing is already paying dividends. We're already seeing the impact. So what we've noticed is this. When we provide our principals and our teachers the curriculum that has high expectation of students, instead of saying, oh, maybe they can't, instead of saying we know they can, guess what happens? We see students meet those standards. It doesn't mean everybody's going to get an A, but that's why we have an A and a B and a C. And sometimes it's okay to get a C. If I worked really hard and I got a C, guess what? That's okay. Did I grow? Did I learn? So what I'm seeing is I would rather see students be in an AP class and get a C than be in a class that is below their expectations and they don't challenge themselves and get an A. It's uncomfortable because we all, myself at the front of the line, we're always used to like, I'm supposed to be chasing these A's, right? And it's important, but learning should be more important than the grade, right? So what are we doing? We're going to continue to focus on the main thing. What helps close gaps the most are the most effective principals with the most effective teachers. We're going to continue. We may have to start saying no to some stuff so that we can keep investing in people. Because at the end of the day, the success, and to answer that question about closing gaps, the only way we close gaps is with people. We are a people, it's a talent pool, and we need to continue to keep our most talented teachers, pay them as best we can. We'll never pay them what they deserve, but we have to do our best, and the same with our principals who sacrifice so much to lead them as well.
Considering the evolving landscape of education, what innovative approaches or strategies do you plan to implement in Dallas ISD to address the needs of students and teachers?
You know, when people ask about innovation, I think someone's always listening for like, oh, some cutting edge. Here's what happens. The real truth is that the implementation is the new innovation. It's about executing what we know works. And sometimes when that work is so hard, we start looking for other things instead of actually focusing on the main thing. So we're always going to work to be as creative as possible, but we also don't want to get ahead of ourselves and use that as an excuse for not focusing on the main thing. And so, like an example, how do you get better at any sport? How do you get better? If you're a long distance runner, how do you get better at being on the cross country team? What are you going to have to do? Practice running. Like, what innovative way are you going to? There's no innovative way. The innovation is the implementation. Like, there's no shortcut. And so I think sometimes, especially people who may not be true, like been educators their career, they like to push on, what's the innovation? What's the innovation? And sometimes the implementation is the innovation. So we've got new comprehensive curriculum that is on grade level, that is challenging our students to think conceptually rather than from a memorization standpoint. I don't know how many of you have had an opportunity in the lower grades of your high school years to have had Carnegie as one of the math curricula, but it is now more conceptualization, less memorization. So it's this problem-solving, critical thinking that's the innovation.
To ask more about evolving, how do you see the role of technology and digital learning in shaping the future of education within the district?
Yeah, I see that as a both and here's why it's a both and. So we could, and I've seen some districts do it, we could get so scared by what's happening with AI that we go, take all the technology away from our students. That might make us safe, but it would not make us productive nor progressive with you, because you are functioning and will continue to function in a world where technology will not be less, it will be more. So are we scared? Absolutely, because we also know a lot of harm can come from the misuse of AI and technology applications. But you can't let fear paralyze you. I can't take those opportunities away from you all. And so what I think we have to do is we have to hire experts, which we already have in our district, and we need to continue to put as many safeguards as we can. And as we find these obstacles or these pitfalls, then we respond to them. But we can't take technology away. AI, the Texas Education Agency is already moving to the standardized tests that the state requires us to give you. They're already starting to use them to score the written selections that are on your STAR test. That started this last December. So not a human being, but an AI. Well, I have questions about that. I know it's going to be more AI, not less, but I still want to push the envelope because I want to know how have they ensured that AI is not going to be biased towards some of my African American students, my Latino students, my students who identify in a gender different way. Like, I need to make sure that these assessments and the way in which they're scored does not increase the biases that we already have. So I have a lot of questions, but what I can't do is I can't protect you all by eliminating it. So it's a both and. Like, I am scared, but we can't be paralyzing because then we aren't preparing you for the real brave new world of what technology is and what all that comes with that.
So I have another question sticking with the theme of growth. Dallas, obviously it already has a really large population and it only seems to be growing every day. How does the district account for that and account for the new students coming in?
You know, what's so interesting is while the community in Dallas ISD is growing, there's actually been a decline in birth rates. I don't know if you all know that. And so it's actually created a decline in the number of school-age children. So our district has actually had a decline, although we're very large, but nonetheless, we've had a decline. So last year we had about 141,000 students. This year we have right over 139,500. So that's still a lot of students. And yet, we also have to pay attention that we are seeing some areas that look like as they develop some more homes, we're going to have to predict, well, as folks have children, we're going to see a wave then of growth. So how do we manage that right now I may be seeing a decline, but in 5 or 10 years, we're going to see what happened again. You know, there'll be this increase. And part of that is also, remember that we're also all living longer. So our own lifespan, someone like me now has a lifespan beyond 85 years. So we're also a community who's getting older because we're living longer. So your question is so appropriate in that it's complex. So what we do right now is we do our projections for how many students we think we're going to have based on development of housing, based on historical practices, and then we have to be ready to adjust when the school year starts. And most of our teachers don't love it. I don't love it either. But what that means is sometimes I have to move, right? Like if this school got more students than this other school, and I chose so many teachers at school A, I may have to move teachers from school A in the first 4 to 6 weeks over to school B because school B had more students than we were anticipating. So it really you can see why relationships is so important, because when you're going to have to ask people to do this, they have to understand the why. Most of the time, even when people aren't thrilled with my decisions, if I can provide them the rationale, what's the thinking behind it, 99% of the time, you know what our staff does, because they're so dedicated to you, they're like, I wouldn't necessarily have done it that way, but I understand it, and to support my students, I'm going to do it. And so I hope that kind of addresses that question.
In your journey, you've emphasized the teacher's role in education. How do you plan to support and empower them?
I'm constantly saying the teacher is the program. And people are like, what does that mean? Well, it means that whatever program you buy, whatever curriculum you buy, it can be the best curriculum ever. If you don't have a great teacher, the program doesn't matter. The program is really the teacher, because the teacher is who facilitates the learning in your classroom. And so the way we need to develop and support that is teachers need strong leaders. So it always is going to go back to, let's make sure that we recruit, we retain, we keep our most important effective principals. They, in turn, will then be able to keep our most effective teachers. And then we have to spend opportunities listening to our teachers and seeing, certainly we need to always look at how can we pay them more. You all are well aware, not that everybody agrees with it, but we do pay our teachers based on performance. So our higher performing teachers do get paid more. That's very different than most other school districts. It is similar to business models, but it's very different from the way I grew up in the educational system. For me, it didn't really matter how effective I was. Each year was going to be $250 more, $250 more, $250 more. So that meant in 10 years, it would take me 10 years to have earned $2,500 raise, 10 years in the career. Today, we know that no one's going to stay in teaching if that's what we do. So we have to incentivize and reward our highest performing teachers as much as we can. And so I think listening to what now that's one important component, but when you think about how you support teachers, that sometimes means what other things do teachers need? Is there a way to give teachers other benefits? Sometimes it may be, is there a facility nearby my school that I could stop and work out on my way home, that I don't have to pay a gym membership? That's one of the things we've asked our staff. Would they be interested if we created some facilities where our teachers and support staff could go and work out? Then they don't have to pay a gym membership, and it's on your way home, or maybe it's on your way in, kind of like what I described I did this morning at 6. Because anything we can do for teachers to know how important, they need to feel valued. Yes, they need to be paid well, but our teachers also want to know that they're important to the process. So we want to emphasize how important they are. We need to recognize our teachers. Some of them get grants to try out new things with you in the classrooms. So awarding them grants so that they can buy certain materials or do certain programs, I think are some things that we will continue to look at.
What is your vision for Dallas ISD, and what legacy do you wish to leave?
You know, when I get asked that question, to be real transparent, it's a really hard question to answer, because I didn't become a superintendent going, this is what I want my legacy to be. That's not how it starts off, just the same way as I was when I was a teacher, when I'm like, I just want some kid somewhere to go. I remember Miss Elizalde, and she made an impact on my life. It's kind of the same thing here. Maybe I spend more time with the adults who spend time with you, and maybe I'm hoping that my legacy is that someone, some principal, some teacher, some bus driver says, you know what, she made a difference for me. Because in making a difference for them, ooh, I got a little choked up with that question, then maybe they're able to make those kinds of continual differences for you. So I don't know that there's like a legacy. I think maybe one of the biggest things is I don't want to be the story. In other words, the reason sometimes people want to talk to me is like, well, there's not a lot of Latinas who are in this role. There's not a lot of women who are in this role. I don't want to be the story. I want everybody who is in Dallas ISD to have had the opportunity to sit in my seat or any seat that they want to, whether it's in the principal's seat, whether it's in the teacher's seat, whether it's the police officer, whether it's the fireman, whatever that seat is, my legacy would be that I was no longer the story, that there were a whole bunch of people that came after me and that I wasn't the story. Then I would feel like maybe I did something that was important.
So speaking of legacy, what message or advice would you like to share with students, especially those who aspire to become teachers or educators?
Well, you know, I started off, when y'all started asking me the first question, my dad said, be anything you want to be, but don't be a teacher because you're not gonna make a lot of money. Remember, I told you, he's like, you're not gonna make a lot of money. So today I would say to any of you, and I know I met a couple of folks when I got here that said they were in the education magnet. And even if you're not, because remember, I didn't start off, my degree is in science, and I ended up becoming a science teacher. So there are a lot of different ways to become a teacher. But my real, I guess my thinking is the beauty of the teacher is if you can remember The Wizard of Oz. I don't know if you all, maybe y'all saw The Wiz instead of The Wizard of Oz, but in The Wizard of Oz, y'all remember it?
Yes.
Yes.
What did the wizard behind the curtain actually do? Nothing. Because the whole time, if you think about the scarecrow always had a brain. The Tin Man always had a heart. And the lion always had courage. Someone just needed to tell them they did. They needed to uncover that they had those things. And in Dallas ISD, one of the primary reasons that I wanted to come back was because in Dallas ISD, our Dallas ISD family all have brains, all have heart, all have courage. I just wanted to be behind the curtain and remind people that they have everything that our kids need and that our kids have everything that you all need if we just work together and keep those high expectations. And as a teacher, as an educator, you constantly get that sense of importance by letting someone else know you didn't make them great. I didn't make anybody great. They were already great. I hopefully just remove the cover so that their greatness was shown.
So you've put a lot of emphasis on strong principles and having teachers that can really help students, but what can we as students do to help bridge the gap between teachers and students?
I think certainly some of the work that you all already do, having this podcast, having this radio show, is a beginning and a continuation of continuing to remind everyone that you all have thoughts and opinions, and that we the adults, need to remember that we learn when we listen, not when we talk. And so maybe you can challenge us to be better listeners so that we can then guide you. Sometimes I spend a lot of time talking, and I have to remind myself, I don't learn when I'm talking. And then I also hear my mom reminding me why I have one mouth and two ears. I'm supposed to listen at least double the amount of time that I'm supposed to talk. So I would encourage all of our students to challenge us to be better listeners.
I do have a fun question for you. After all your travels and experiences, are you a Dallas Cowboys fan or a fan of any other sports teams?
So yeah, it's been a painful Dallas Cowboy fan, but I am nonetheless a Dallas Cowboy fan because you can't be a fair-weathered friend, right? So I am, and I've been a Cowboy fan since I was a little girl in Laredo, Texas. I used to have posters of the Cowboys on my wall in my bedroom. So I'm absolutely a Dallas Cowboy fan. I really was a San Antonio Spurs basketball fan because I had spent so many years in San Antonio. But you can't come to Dallas as long as I've been here and not recognize the greatness that was Dirk Nowitzki, and of course Luka Doncic. Mm-hmm. So, and I don't think my husband would let me in the house if I hadn't become a Dallas Mavericks fan. And I have to add a plug for the Dallas Mavericks because St. Marshall and the leadership of the Dallas Mavericks have absolutely been phenomenal in helping us and sponsoring things at schools. So they're also a great partner. And I do love sports, by the way. I love all sports. And I love that the Rangers won the World Series. So we got some great teams in our area. And it's fun. I'm glad you even said it's a fun question. It's fun to go to these events or even to just watch them, make popcorn at home and watch the game and hang out in my pajamas sometimes and just enjoy laying back and enjoying watching people do phenomenal things in sports.
As we conclude this interview, Dr. Elizalde, you shared your journey, vision, and insights with us. If you could leave our audience with one key takeaway or piece of advice to inspire them in their educational pursuits, what would it be?
Remember that we are all perfectly imperfect. That's what we're perfect at being. The minute we are vulnerable to recognize that we are not perfect, but every day we're going to do our very best. And if that's what everybody brings to the table and that's what I bring to the table, there isn't anything that we cannot get this district to do in serving the needs and eclipsing your dreams. It should be your dream. We should simply be able to lay out the ladder or the stairs so you can reach it.
Well, this wraps up our interview for today. I just wanted to say thank you, Dr. Elizalde, for joining us today on our show. Your interview was truly inspiring, and we are so honored and grateful for you to have joined us. And we can't wait to see what you bring next to Dallas ISD. Please be sure to follow us on all of our social medias down below. And until next time, this is KSBM Radio, the voice of Townview. I'm Art Lover.
I'm Unison.
I'm JoJo.
I'm Violet.
And we will see you next time. Bye.
Thank you for listening to KSBM Radio, the voice of Townview.
My radio station.
We hope you enjoyed the great content and great discussion, all from a student's perspective. Make sure to follow us on Twitter for the latest updates at KSBM_TVT or on Facebook at KSBM Radio.
Add them on Facebook.
Check them on Facebook.
Take care.